this is really quite an exciting moment, and the reason is because I don't know many of you, and I'm used to speaking in halls where we would have a small community that is coming together thinking around natural capital, and that movement is now changing. Back in 2012 at Rio Plus 20, a group of 12 people got together in a bar. That's where most good ideas start. And they drank too much tequila. And they started saying, actually, how can we stop competing over the methodologies that we've got on this thing called capital and actually start working together to change the system? Those 12 people turned into 40 quite quickly. Those 40 people all had methodologies. I'd written one of them at the Crown Estate when I was there. I read the other 39. I thought the other 39 weren't very good, so I wrote my own. Isn't that the problem we all have? But we all got together, and then we wrote the Natural Capital Protocol. That Natural Capital Protocol harmonized at that period of time, and there are moments, aren't there, where things come together. So that was 2015. Do you remember that? Paris Agreement, all of those sort of things. All of the world felt like we were coming together then. What's happened since then, since that internationally accepted framework's out there for business, since the UN system of environmental economic accounts that countries are using is together, is that we've then had a blossoming of new ideas, of new initiatives that have come from that. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. So the coalition, am I going the wrong way here? No, there we go. The coalition, like I said, came out of that. It was originally TEEB for business. So TEEB, the Economic Scientific Documents, who knows that? Seeing some nods here, you know it, that's good. Okay, TEEB, I'm on the TEEB board at the moment, was set up to write the scientific approach to this back in 2008. That then turned into TEEB for Business, which became the Natural Capital Coalition, which then became the Social and Human Capital Coalition, uniting with it to become the Capitals Coalition. The reason why we had to unite with social and human, and I'm not trying to jump too far ahead here, we're talking about natural capital here today, but actually we realized quite quickly that if you just focus on one capital, be it financial capital, be it natural capital, you've got a problem because there's unintended consequences. You have to actually look at all of the capitals together. So before you leave this hall today, you need to start thinking of all of those other capitals as well that are in there. So the Capitals Coalition is the body that brings together the movement that's out there. We think there's about 30,000 around the world that we're engaging with on an annual database, annual basis. I'm going to have to update that when I get back today with at least another 500 that I think are in the hall today. So that's a really good thing. The problem that we've got, and I think all of you will be very aware of this, is that the economic system at the moment only looks really at the financial capital, doesn't it? The produced capital, as we would call it, the IP that's there, the manufactured capital, the assets that you've got, the bits that you can put down into the asset book. It doesn't include nature, people, and society. We all know, that's why you're here in the room today, that actually that is important as well. There are structured processes, robust processes, academic ways of looking at this. There's methodologies, there's tools, there's resources that will allow you to bring those things into the way that you account for nature, people, and the economic processes. And what we need to do by 2030 is to be able to not be a movement anymore, but actually have that embedded into the way that we do things. And there's some things that are happening that are going to allow us to do that as well. So there's 3 shifts over the last 10, 15 years that have occurred within the natural capital movement, which have helped to set out really what this is, how this is different to ESG, how this is different to what you might be familiar with sustainability, corporate sustainability, those sort of things. What we've got here is actually, first of all, that we're not just looking outwardly at the impact, like we do at sustainability reports, but we're also looking at those dependencies. So we're looking at actually what we depend upon on a daily basis. So when you open up your office in the morning, you need to make sure there's water. I'm sure everyone has hopefully just heard recently the Silicon Valley, there's a big investment going on in Korea. There's Warren Buffett has been involved in some of this as well. So have you seen this story? They invested in this new silicon. First time Warren Buffett's invested in silicon. They had to close the plant after a couple of days. Do you know why? They hadn't looked at the amount of water that was going to be needed. Isn't that astounding in this day and age? It's all up and running again now, but there wasn't enough water to supply the local community and this new plant. So that's why this is so important. The other things in this, measure and value, so it's not just about measurements, it's also about valuing, okay? So we've got to be able to look at what the value of these things are, not just the measurements. So if we look at 1 trillion trees, that sounds really good to me, doesn't it? What trees? Where trees? Who's benefiting? 1,000 tons of carbon, 1,000 cubic meters of water, 1,000 new jobs during COVID. Isn't that a brilliant thing? Well, were they 0 hours contracts or not? We need to know the value of these things if we're going to be able to make a decision about it. So therefore, it's no good having all of these measurements of things if we don't convert them into the impact and the dependency. And then the last thing, I've worked in big global companies for about 20 years before this. Reed Elsevier, now Relex, the Crown Estate and various others. In that time, I would have a team of people working for me, and every year at budget time in November, they'd come to me and say, my issue's the most important. And I'd sit there and I'd go, I'll just check with which dinner party the CEO went to last week, because that's the one we're going to be doing. But actually, what is it we've got to focus on this year? And you do this trade-off between them. Well, what really happens is that all of them are interconnected. We all know that. So we need a system to be able to look at these in an interconnected way. That's what Capitals does. So, where are we? We're in a period of change now. Up until now, all of the guidance, all of the tools you will have seen, all in the language of could. I could do this, I could do that. There's 14 different approaches that you can use to actually measure the valuation. All of those things are out there, but they're all in the language of what you could be doing. We're now moving into the period of should, what we should be doing. This is an accelerated period, which is why there's so many new people coming into the space. And all of that language is now being defined. We're all getting into barriers. It's like two snooker cues on a pool table, okay? The balls are bouncing around, but we're heading towards the pocket now. And actually, we're putting in those boundaries. What is acceptable? Actually, when you're measuring water usage, should you be using replacement costs? Should you be using other different formats? We're now defining that and saying, actually, no, you must use this. And if you're going to use that, use it in a consistent way. This means we're starting to get to consistency in the way that we will be able to compare different people's approaches to this. So that's really important. But this moment is an accelerated one. We're seeing massive growth. I'm back to 300 plus emails a day at the moment, particularly since Montreal, and we'll get to that in a second. So Montreal, we just heard from the Right Honourable John Glenn there that actually Baroness Penn was there. I met with her while we were there as well. We took businesses, we set up Business for Nature a few years ago. Who's heard of Business for Nature? Is that good? We set up that a few years ago to be a body to take in the discussions, the argument into this process at COP15. With that, we actually had over 1,000 businesses turn up. All of those businesses were vetted. All of those businesses were trying to change the conversation, change the way that we did this. Those businesses, like when we had Paris Agreement in 2015, those businesses played an essential role in what happened in Montreal. They sat there and they said, no, we do want to be regulated. We do want to make a level playing field. We do want to change the way that this is happening at the moment. And that really did change the negotiators' minds. I saw it going on. We saw the usual fights between different countries, the different divisions that are always set up in these big international agreements. But businesses were there saying, no, we want this. We want this to happen. And that made a massive difference. The language on the COP15, who's read the full agreement, the Global Biodiversity Framework? Thank you. Good. So Target 15, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Target 15. Governments have to take action to regulate the way that large and transnational businesses are applying this work. So that means that all large and transnational businesses, not just in their operations, but also through their supply chains and value chains, which means it's picking up all of the smaller and medium enterprise organizations as well, will need to, by 2030, assess and disclose their impacts and dependencies and their risks on nature. Now, that is really significant, okay? So any company that is not already applying a capitals approach needs to start doing it. They're going to have to start applying natural capital. Because if they don't, how are they going to understand their impacts and dependencies? This means that this work that we've been working on as a community for many years now is now being regulated. It's changing. We heard about the UK's been doing natural capital accounts since 2013. We're now looking at over 80 countries that are doing that. The US, I first went to speak to Obama's administration 8 years ago about the US doing it. Funnily enough, there was a hiatus for 5 years. I'm not quite sure why. Then we got to Biden introducing it. It's now being built into the natural capital, into the national accounts. Natural capital is in the national accounts there. And that is a game changer as well. We're now seeing other countries following. Over 80 countries now doing that. There's a clear connection between what governments are doing and what businesses are doing. But there is confusion in this space. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of new initiatives out there. I'm sure a lot of you here are setting up new initiatives. That's really to be encouraged at the moment. We need to do that. But we also need that consistency in the way that we do it. That's why the coalition was formed by the community, to be a space where we can look at the standardization. If we all fight, as we were in 2012, over the different approaches, over the different tools, we're not going to get there. We need to have consistency in what the asset classes are. We need to have consistency in what we mean by natural capital. We need to have those things in place. We need to have an audit process, which we're building at the moment. We need to have a way of actually assuring that people are doing things, that people are regulated within this. And that is starting to occur. So if you're developing tools, resources, different processes at the moment, come and talk to us, because if we do this together, we can change the system. Quantity as well. There's not enough organizations doing this. We had about 40 organizations last year do an integrated capitals approach. We're at about 25,000 applying natural capital around the world, businesses that we're aware of, which is not bad, but that isn't all businesses, is it? And we know from 2030, all businesses will need to do this. But more importantly than all of that is the quality of it. There's no point in actually doing an assessment and coming out with these numbers if you're not going to actually apply it. You have to actually put this into practice and actually realize the value of valuation. Realize that actually every decision will be better informed if you can actually include those values that are produced through the natural, social, human capital as well. So what we're doing at the moment is we're building a house. The Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure we just heard about, a really useful product that's just come out, is very much based around the work that the Natural Capital Protocol and those other tools are there, so much so that when you pick up the version on the 28th of March, when it's the next one's coming out, the next beta version, it will have very clearly a doorway into the Natural Capital Protocol. Okay? So you're not doing either TNFD or the Natural Capital Protocol, you're doing both. And we've purposely been working very closely with Tony and Emily, the executive director and technical director. In fact, the technical director used to work for us for one time. All of these people are working very closely together. Science-Based Targets for Nature, Erin Billman that's running that. I've set up a peer group on a Tuesday night where all of these CEOs talk for enough time together to be able to set up this house together. All of those science-based targets also starting to build in all of this work. It's all interconnected. There's a loop that you can see that connects all of this together as well. We're all using this same language here, that to assess, commit, transform, disclose. Okay? You may think that we all have different frameworks, but if you look at the TNFD now, the Task Force for Nature-Related, the SBTN, they're all now using this same language. We've started to build this in to be consistent, to make it easier for users. This is all on our website if you want to look at it as well, but it's not just what businesses are doing. We need to have a common thread through what value is through to finance and then through to governments as well. It's governments that are setting the regulations, setting the rules that businesses then need to apply through to finance. We need to have a common understanding, a standardization, which is why we need to come together on this and create a single movement, not competing movements. With this, we've just released some case studies in Davos this year, Wholesome, about 10 of them, and this case study framework is going to be used by the TNFD to show how it fits into this. It's going to be used by other networks to show actually how they fit in to the system. In this case, Wholesome is really focusing on the disclose piece, as you can see, but also is doing other pieces within the puzzle. We can also look at BNP Paribas, which is doing something very similar here and has been working with us for years as well. So 3 more things before I end. I said at the beginning, natural capital, really important. Start with that. Definitely, we have to have the fundamental base. Everything is dependent upon nature. We all know that, okay? But don't extract and only do that. Make sure that you're also looking at the other issues that are around the other capitals. This means you need to have an integrated framework for that. That will be coming out on June the 6th this year. We've been working for 2 or 3 years, particularly in the food sector and other sectors which are nexus points, looking at really how do you grapple with those trade-offs. Okay? Those trade-offs are there, we make them every day, but we need to start thinking about really what does that mean. For that, we've also developed and now launched, which will be included in other frameworks as well, an attribution framework equivalent to the scopes 1, 2, and 3 that are used for greenhouse gas. You can do the same thing for natural, social, and human capital as well. Really important, probably about 5 years ahead of the time, a bit like the Natural Capital Protocol was before the movement would be created, but really important to have that there. The second piece here is going to be about data. We can have the frameworks and try and get everyone to apply them, or we can start pumping the information through to people. Two pieces here, the digitalization of data. XBRL, who's familiar with XBRL? Any hands up? Good. XBRL was set up to basically start to digitalize the financial data. We're now doing the same thing with sustainability data. John Turner, the CEO there, is now working for me, and what we're doing is we're digitalizing all of this information to make sure it can flow. As well as the flow, we also need to have the usefulness and relevance of information. Next week, in fact this weekend, I'm going to be talking to the Global Accounting Alliance, IFAC, all of the big accountancy bodies, about how they need to skill up now to be able to cover this space. Okay? Within that space, in the framework, the conceptual framework that all businesses use, it says that information should be useful and relevant. If you're just giving measurements, you are neither providing useful nor relevant information. And I'd be rather worried there's going to be a court case quite soon about that. You need to provide information on your impacts and dependencies. That's what the Value Commission is doing. I've worked with all of the different organizations that have these value factors, the factors that you times the measurement by to get to impact and dependency. They've all agreed to put them into a central trust to make them publicly available to everyone rather than charging for them. This really is a game changer, to be able to allow everyone to have consistent approaches to the way that they convert things from measurements into impacts and dependencies. This really will change things, not because of the database, but because of the rules that come out from that. We're setting a set of global criteria that you will have to use if you want to get audited approach to the way that you're doing this. And finally, the skills and knowledge. Okay? There's a massive skills and knowledge gap here. The reason why I'm talking to the accountancy profession this week is because they're the people that will be in the businesses, the financial controllers, the FDs that will be doing this work. They need to be able to actually understand what we mean by these capitals, and at the moment they don't. There's a massive, if you're getting into this space now, it's a great career move, because actually there's an awful lot of work out there. I'm aware of at least 20 or 30 jobs, so try and grab me on the way out if you're looking for something. Shouldn't have said that, should I? There's an awful lot of work at the moment in this space. We've also developed an online course after a 3-year EU project, which we did, We Value Nature. We've turned all of that information. We used to go around and run workshops like this around the world. We've now turned all of that into an online course, which you can go through, get your CPD, get your training, get qualified to be able to do this if you want to. We've just been launching the social and human one in the next couple of weeks as well. So you'll be able to see that April, that is actually, sorry. So we've done the natural capital one. We're now doing the social and human one as well. That was all from me. Please do, the last message here, please do seriously think about what you're doing, how you can collaborate and work with others. The difference between the way that we've evolved over centuries is through working together. That's what really makes the difference here. That's why it's great to be in this room with you today. So find the people through the breaks, through the coffee breaks, make bilateral agreements, start working with them, but also think about the movement as a whole. What are you doing that is going to contribute to the change that we're trying to make here? Thank you very much.